I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the chapel's private dressing room, fully expecting to help my brother's bride with her veil. But instead I found her pinned against the mahogany vanity, frantically kissing my husband of 7 years. I froze, the breath violently sucked from my lungs. But before I could scream, my brother Lucas stepped out from the shadows of the hallway behind me, placed a calm hand on my shoulder, and winked. "Relax," he whispered, his voice dangerously steady. "The main event is about to start." I stood there in my $1,200 silk bridesmaid dress, staring through the crack in the door at Julian, the man I had built my entire life around, as he desperately clawed at the lace bodice of Mia's wedding gown. I was 34 years old, and in a single shattered second, the entire foundation of my existence dissolved into dust. For 7 years, I washed and ironed the shirts he wore, cooked his meals, and celebrated his promotions. I was the devoted wife who poured $68,000 of my grandfather's inheritance into Julian's startup architecture firm so he could chase his dreams. Julian was charming, fiercely ambitious, and the kind of man who always knew exactly what to say to make you feel like the center of the universe. We lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house in the suburbs, and we were supposed to start trying for our first baby the following month. I had spent the last 3 years meticulously charting my ovulation cycles, taking expensive supplements, and enduring invasive fertility appointments, while Julian held my hand and promised me we would be the perfect parents. And then there was Mia. She was 26, a former pageant queen with a blinding smile, and an appetite for luxury that my brother Lucas was all too happy to fund. Lucas was a wildly successful corporate attorney, 36 years old, and he worshipped the ground she walked on. Or so I thought. When Lucas first introduced Mia to the family 2 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms. I threw her lavish birthday parties, I helped her pick out her wedding centerpieces, and I defended her when my mother complained that Mia was entirely too self-absorbed. And you want to know the worst part? I had defended Julian too. Over the last 8 months, Julian had grown distant. He started working late, claiming his firm was bidding on a massive commercial project downtown. He changed the passcode on his phone, telling me his firm upgraded their security protocols. When I found an unfamiliar, cloying vanilla perfume scent on his jacket, he looked me dead in the eye and said he had been crammed in a tiny elevator with a client. The gaslighting was masterful. Whenever I questioned his whereabouts, he would twist it back on me. "You're acting crazy," he would sigh, shaking his head with this perfect manufactured look of disappointment. "I am killing myself at the office to provide for our future, for our family, and you're at home accusing me of nonsense. She means nothing to me. Honestly, Elena, you need to speak to a therapist about these insecurities." He made me feel like I was losing my mind. I actually went to my doctor and asked for an anxiety prescription because I was convinced I was sabotaging my own perfect marriage. But the cracks had started to show 3 weeks before the wedding. I had logged into our joint savings account to transfer money for our upcoming anniversary trip to Italy. When I opened the portal, the balance wasn't $114,000 anymore. It was $17.42. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. My vision blurred. I couldn't comprehend what I was looking at. When I finally pulled the detailed statements, I found a horrific trail of financial deceit. There were massive wire transfers to an LLC I had never heard of. There were $400 dinners at steakhouses on nights Julian claimed he was eating stale takeout at his desk. There was a $12,500 charge at a boutique jewelry store. I had initially confronted him about the missing funds, panic-stricken, thinking we had been hacked. He played the victim perfectly, claiming his business partner had made a catastrophic error with their tax withholdings and the IRS had temporarily frozen the assets. He swore on his mother's life he was sorting it out. But standing in that chapel hallway, feeling the heavy, undeniable weight of Lucas's hand on my shoulder, the pieces violently snapped together. The $12,500 wasn't a tax error. It was the custom diamond tennis bracelet currently sparkling on Mia's wrist as Julian kissed her neck. I couldn't breathe. I backed away from the door, my hands trembling so violently I thought my bones might shatter. I looked up at my brother. Lucas's face was an emotionless mask, his jaw clenched, his dark eyes locked onto mine. He quietly pulled me down the hall and into an empty Sunday school classroom, shutting the door behind us. "How long?" I choked out, the tears finally spilling over my mascara. "Lucas, how long have you known?" 6 weeks, he said flatly, pulling a thick manila envelope from his jacket. I hired a private investigator when I caught her lying about a weekend trip to Miami with her girlfriends. They weren't in Miami, Elena. She was at the St. Regis downtown, with Julian. I felt violently ill. The stories center on marital infidelity, double lives, and financial deceit. My husband and my soon-to-be sister-in-law. "Why didn't you tell me?" I sobbed, my voice echoing off the cinder block walls. "Why are we here? Why are you in a tuxedo? Cancel the wedding, Lucas. You can't let her walk down that aisle." Lucas grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were entirely devoid of grief. They were burning with pure, unadulterated vengeance. "If I cancel the wedding right now, she walks away with half the deposit money. She plays the victim to her family, and Julian has time to hide the rest of the assets he stole from you," Lucas said softly. "I didn't tell you because I needed you to act normal. I needed Julian to think he was invincible. But today they lose everything." He opened the envelope and handed me a stack of glossy photographs. There they were, Julian and Mia laughing at a cafe, Julian and Mia walking into a hotel, a photocopy of a lease agreement for a luxury apartment downtown, signed by Julian, co-signed by Mia. "He drained your savings to fund her lifestyle while I was working," Lucas explained coldly. "He bought her the jewelry. He paid for the apartment. They are planning to leave us. They were going to wait until after the wedding, let me pay off her family's debts, and then run. But I spent the last month quietly moving all of my assets into an irrevocable trust. I filed the annulment paperwork yesterday, citing fraud. And I had my firm's forensic accountants tear Julian's business apart. I have every single wire transfer, every hidden burner phone record, every text message." My quiet rage began to overtake my profound grief. I stopped crying. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, feeling a terrifying, icy calm wash over me. The breaking point had arrived. I wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. I was a woman ready to go to war. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We let the ceremony happen," Lucas instructed, checking his platinum watch. "We smile, we take the photos, and at the reception, when it's time for my groom's toast, we burn their world to the ground." I nodded. I walked into the chapel bathroom, splashed freezing water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and walked back out to the altar. For the next 2 hours, I gave the greatest performance of my life. I stood beside Mia as she recited her vows, promising to love and honor my brother. I watched Julian sitting in the 3rd row, dabbing a fake tear from his eye. I smiled for the photographer. I held the bouquet. I played the long game. The reception was held at a sprawling $45,000 a night country club. 250 guests were seated at tables adorned with imported white orchids. The champagne was flowing. The jazz band was playing perfectly. Julian sat beside me at the head table, casually resting his hand on my thigh under the tablecloth. "You look beautiful tonight, babe," he whispered in my ear, kissing my cheek. "I'm so lucky." I looked at him, truly looking at him for the first time without the lens of love, and saw nothing but a pathetic, hollow parasite. "You have no idea," I smiled back. At 8:30 p.m., the band stopped playing. The lights dimmed. It was time for the speeches. The audience watches for the satisfaction of seeing the cheater lose everything. Lucas stood up, tapping his crystal champagne flute with a silver spoon. The room fell entirely silent. He picked up the microphone and stepped out from behind the head table, walking slowly to the center of the dance floor. "Family, friends," Lucas began, his voice echoing through the massive ballroom. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Weddings are a time of truth, a time to stand before God and everyone you love and lay all your cards on the table. Mia and I, we have a very unique relationship. In fact, she is so close to my family, she has spent the last 8 months intimately getting to know my brother-in-law, Julian." A ripple of polite, confused laughter echoed through the room. Mia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Julian's hand tightened on my thigh. "When I was thinking about what to say tonight," Lucas continued, pacing slowly, "I realized that words weren't enough. I needed to show you. I asked the venue to set up a little slideshow, just a compilation of some of Mia and Julian's best moments together." Lucas snapped his fingers. The massive projector screen behind the band dropped down. The room went pitch black, and suddenly, at 50 feet wide, a high-definition photograph of Julian and Mia passionately kissing on the balcony of the St. Regis Hotel flashed onto the screen. A collective, horrified gasp ripped through the room. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. "Next slide, please," Lucas said into the microphone. Click. A screenshot of a text message sent at 11:42 p.m. from Julian to Mia. It read, "I can't stand looking at Elena anymore. Just a few more weeks, baby, and we take the money and go." Chaos erupted. Mia's mother screamed. Julian violently ripped his hand away from my leg, his face draining of all color. He looked like he was going to vomit. He stared at the screen, then at Lucas, then slowly turned to me. "Elena, Julian stammered, his eyes wide with absolute terror. I stood up slowly, picking up my full glass of red wine. I looked down at him, this cowardly, pathetic man who had drained my life savings and shattered my future. The confrontation was an ambush. "You're acting crazy, Julian," I said, repeating his favorite gaslighting phrase right back to him, my voice dripping with venom. "She means nothing to you, right?" And with a flick of my wrist, I threw the entire glass of Cabernet directly into his face, the dark red liquid splashing all over his crisp, white tuxedo shirt. "Next slide," Lucas yelled over the screaming crowd. Click. Bank statements, highlighting the $114,000 Julian had stolen from our joint account, highlighting the $12,500 bracelet on Mia's wrist, exposing the mistress to her own family, exposing the financial victory, exposing everything. Mia was sobbing hysterically, burying her face in her hands, her immaculate makeup running down her face in thick black streaks. Her father, a proud, strict military man, marched up to the head table, grabbed Mia by the arm, and practically dragged her out of the room, yelling that she was a disgrace to their bloodline. Julian was hyperventilating, wiping wine and sweat from his eyes. He lunged toward me, begging, "Elena, please, let me explain. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. Please." I stepped back, entirely untouchable. I looked him dead in the eye, delivering my final words. Cold, calculated, and devastating. "The papers will be served to your office on Monday morning at 8 a.m. I know about the LLC. I know about the apartment. My lawyer is freezing your firm's accounts as we speak. Do not ever contact me again. Enjoy the rest of the reception, Julian. You paid enough for it." I turned my back on him and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked with my head held high, the sound of my heels clicking against the marble floors, leaving the blazing wreckage of his life behind me. The aftermath was brutal for them, but beautiful for me. My lawyer, a brilliant, ruthless shark, absolutely decimated Julian in court. Because we proved he used marital funds to finance an illicit affair, the judge awarded me the entire house, my original $68,000 investment back, plus punitive damages. Julian was forced to liquidate his shares in his architecture firm just to pay me off. He ended up moving into a tiny, run-down studio apartment on the edge of town, entirely broke. Mia's family completely cut her off. When the money dried up, so did her affection for Julian. She left him 3 months later for a nightclub promoter and blocked his number. He actually had the audacity to show up at my front door on a rainy Tuesday night, crying, begging for a second chance. I didn't even open the security screen. I just laughed, told him he was trespassing, and called the police. It's been 2 years since that wedding. Every story must end with the woman completely vindicated. I sold the colonial house and used the money to start my own boutique design agency, which is currently on track to clear $500,000 this year. Lucas and I take a vacation every summer to celebrate our absolute freedom. Moving on, glowing up, peace, and absolute freedom. Sometimes, the greatest gift a man can give you is showing you exactly who he is, so you can burn him to the ground and build an empire on his ashes.